So I'm not going to read from the story that was in Philadelphia Stories, but I am going to read a story that is a Philadelphia story, so I hope that fits the bill. This is called Waste Management, and it's going to be in Colorado Review fall issue of this year. I've just finished giving the day's last tour at the museum where I work, when my husband Bert calls me on my cell. I've known this call would come for some time, because Bert doesn't like confrontations, but I didn't expect it would happen here, in the tracklit gallery on the second floor, amid cases of Maurice Sendak's early sketches of interactive digital touchscreens. I hold the phone loosely to my ear, and he says what he has to say, which isn't exactly what I'd imagined it would be, but then I suppose nothing ever is. When the conversation is over, I press the red button on the nearest touchscreen and listen to Maurice Sendak describe his deep-seated childhood fear of being abducted by, like the Lindbergh baby, and his brother's cruel rejoinder, who would ever want to kidnap you? Moving, it turns out, isn't hard. I hate leaving our house and its comfortably creaky front porch, but Bert makes sure to never be around, and I manage to get all my things out in a matter of days, staying in our bed, and when I can't take that anymore, in a hotel room he pays for, until I'm done. Before I know it, I have a new place and a pile of empty cardboard boxes in the corner, waiting for me to flatten and dispose of them so that we can all get on with our lives. My new home is a thinly carpeted one-bedroom that looks over an alley on one side and a street corner on the other. A sandwich shop and a number of stray cats share my dumpster, which I can see through the alley side window. I've never before had such a cinematic view of a public dumpster, so on the first night in my new place, for lack of anything better to do, I sit down on a stool with a mug of hot tea and watch it, half hoping a criminal will dump a body there, and my testimony will later send him to jail. No criminals come, just the cats, slithering around corners and jumping up on cans. I have almost given up on the show when a little woman in filthy kitchen whites emerges from the back door of the sandwich shop and proceeds to dump a giant canister of food waste. I stand up, nearly scalding my hand, because I'm certain I see something splash into the open recycling bin where I've been planning to take my boxes. She does it again the second night, and the third, leaving a trail of guts and bacteria, at which point I have to accept it as her routine, disgusted though I am. Of course, I brought this on myself. I'd have no problem if I hadn't made a point of watching, or if I had no boxes to toss. But I did, and I do. And now it's clear I can't go on living my life as I have before, now that I've seen what happens in dumpsters. In the end, I make the only sensible decision. I burn my boxes with dignity in the park. An elderly woman sits on a wooden bench near the entrance. It's her bench. She's been there every time I've come. She wears a hat with netting over her face, which makes her look like a man in drag. I pass her with my first stack of boxes, and she nods, as though approving my plan in advance. I set them up, still box-shaped, on the blacktop, making sure to keep away from the grass. When the smoke begins to rise in little curls from my fire, she calls over to me. "They're going to see you from the street," she says. She points to the row of houses on the far side of the park, where families live with dogs. A man shades his eyes from one of the stoops. I wave, he looks away. "They already have," I say. "There are bigger parks," she says, "better places for a bonfire. None that I can walk to." "Well, if convenience is what you need." At the police station, I explain that my method of disposal is more humane than the practice more commonly accepted. "It is against the law to start a fire in a public park," the officer says. "I have no remorse," I tell him loudly. He shakes his head, clearly afraid, and hands me a citation and fine. I pay it, of course. Generally speaking, I follow the rules. As I leave the station, I see a man I know turn a corner, as though ducking out of my sight. I can't determine who he is, though I know he isn't Bert, whom I haven't seen in weeks. The sight of this familiar back turning a corner triggers something in my brain, and I know he is a person I have just met, or perhaps someone I have always known, the two conditions being often conflated in my mind. I follow him, tucking the citation into my purse, and find him holding a hot dog next to a street vendor's cart. There are no condiments on the dog, so I know it is a ruse. He is the man who shaded his eyes from his stoop. "I saw you start the fire," he says. "Were the boxes empty?" Which is actually a pretty silly question. Who would ever burn boxes that were full? "What do you think?" I ask, buying time. He's a performer, so he has to stroke his chin while he mulls over the options. "I think they were empty," he says finally, beaming. Since he seems to expect applause, I offer him a slow, loud clap. Even though it was obvious, I have to admit I'm glad he got it right. A boy on a bike escorts me home, ringing his bell at every pedestrian crosswalk. He's not one of those bicycle bandits I keep hearing about on the news, just a weird, nice kid who likes to share the facts he knows. He's been to the Maurice Sendak exhibit more than once, so I feel like I know him, even though I don't. At my door, I thank him for the information about wood frog hibernation and tell him I have to clean my place. When Bert was around, he liked to sit cross-legged in the hall and wait for me to make my way on my own. Sorry, start over. When Bert was around, he liked to sit cross-legged in the hall and wait for me to make my way to his knees with a dustbuster. He'd pull me down into his lap, which was easy because I was already stooped, and then he'd kiss me and make me switch off the power. When we were happy, the house was always half vacuumed, but more often than not, it was clean. Bert was always suffering from something, a corrosive stomachache, an odd pain behind his brow. He feared pancreatic cancer and ALS, transverse myelitis, and even AIDS. I read him symptom summaries off the internet and felt his pulse whenever he asked. He had me so convinced that he would die that even now I must remind myself he isn't dead, only living with somebody else. Later on, I poured more boxes in the park. The man who shaded his eyes walks up holding a plastic bottle of mineral water, still cloudy with refrigeration. He tells me his name is Co. The drag lady snorts from her nearby bench. As in company, I ask? As in C-O-E, spelled like toe and hoe, the garden kind, not the promiscuous kind. It's my mother's maiden name. I think it's a stupid name, and I tell him so. What's yours? If I were looking for love, I'd go to a bar, I say, loud enough for my veiled friend to hear. She nods supportively, by now knowing all about my life. So are you using lighter fluid or anything like that? He persists. And in due time, he's following me home. Our country's falling apart, Co says, as we step around a chunk of sidewalk that looks like some kind of trap. Our great American roads, our bridges and sewers, they're crumbling before our eyes. Philadelphia, for instance, made of rust. This city's problem is the accent, I tell him. I attempt to impersonate it and fail. I was born and raised in Ohio. For reasons I don't understand, I let him come up and sit on the edge of my couch. We drink beer, and when no one's looking, we lean over the back of the couch to throw our empties on the sidewalk below. It's the day after the garbage pickup, and there are so many broken bottles on my street, 10 more won't make a difference. It's so easy to trash what's already wrecked, Co says, waving his hand out the window. We're good citizens, and look at us. Co is an engineer, so he can really only speak for himself. The Maurice Sendak exhibit is good, but I didn't create it. I just sell people tickets and tell them things they could just as well learn from the internet. How do you dispose of your trash? I ask him, looking down. Our broken bottles stand out from the rest with their moss green glass and pale yellow labels. He smiles at me as though I'm in grade school and I've just asked a question that's a little advanced for my age. I usually do it the normal way, he says, not that there's anything wrong with you. That evening when he's gone, I go down to the sidewalk to sweep the bottle shards into a plastic recycling bin and take them to the city compactor. You can't burn glass the way you can burn paper, and anyway, you can't do everything yourself. So that's the beginning. If you're interested in reading more, I hope you'll check out the Colorado Review in the fall. I just want to thank the McGlinn family again for this wonderful prize, and Christine and Carla for having me here today.